Friends, welcome again to Cultural Savage. This week, I have the pleasure of interviewing KJ Ramsey. She has a BA from Covenant College, an MA from Denver Seminary, and is a licensed professional counselor, a writer, and a recovering idealist who believes sorrow and joy coexist. She is the author of the book, This Too Shall Last, Finding Grace When Suffering Lingers, and her writing has been published in Christianity Today, Relevant, The Huffington Post, Fathom Magazine, Health Central, and more on the integration of theology, psychology, and spiritual formation. She and her husband live in Denver, Colorado. You can follow her writing at kjramsey.com and across social media at kjramseywrites. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Thanks for having me, and I am okay.
It's okay to be okay. Yes.
Exactly. I like to be honest, you know?
That's good. We like that around here. We like
Yeah.
honesty.
I like to give honest answers.
That's good. It's good to be honest about where we're at, because otherwise we just create a facade and then we have to keep it up, and then Instagram loves us and we have a million followers and we hate everything about it. So
yeah, that wouldn't work well for me.
No, not at all. Well, for those that don't know you, I've been following you on Twitter for a little while now, and keeping up with your writings. I haven't read your book yet, and I'm sorry, but I want to.
That's okay.
I genuinely want to, because the concept of suffering and theodicy and all of that really strikes a chord with me, and it's where my faith tends to bottom out the easiest. So I'm always curious to read things that aren't necessarily theological treatises on why I shouldn't be upset when something bad happens.
Yeah, it's definitely not that.
That's awesome. So it's on my list to read. But for those that don't know you, can you share some of your story, just where you're at, how you got there, just who
Absolutely.
you are?
Yeah. So I put recovering idealist in my bio because I'm someone who is always kind of sensing the ideal of what we can be and where we're headed. And that means I feel the gap between where we are and what we were made for really deeply. And that can mean living really frustrated. So I can be a pretty angsty, frustrated person. But thankfully, by grace, I'm recovering from that idealism and learning how to be where I am and see what's good here. And the way that I've been thrust into that place of acceptance and awareness is through, in large part, living with autoimmune disease for the last nearly 12 years, which is weird. Like when I come up to another year to be like, wow, it's 12 years now. Okay.
Yeah.
But this winter it'll be 12 years. And so in those 12 years, I've had every single day has had some measure of physical pain. And when pain doesn't go away, you're really fragile and you have to kind of experience yourself differently. And so this disease is a big part of my story. It's shaped me into, I hope, a person that can help others like embrace where they are too. Not afraid of hard things, not afraid of sadness like I used to be. That's a little bit.
That's great. You mentioned being fragile. I'm wondering, how does fragility ground you in the now?
Yeah, so fragility grounds me in the now, large part because it, like pain and even emotional dysregulation, they force us to pay attention. It's like alarm bells of, whoa, like something's off. And when you live with a disease like mine, there's a lot of alarm bells and every single day.
Yeah.
And most of the time we learn how to numb and like dismiss those alarms,
Hmm.
pretend that they're not as loud as they are so that we can keep going on with life and feel okay. But A, that didn't work for me.
Yeah.
And B, um, it's in attending to the alarms of pain in my body and the distress that I feel throughout the day from my own sense of inadequacy or, you know, dealing with emotional wounds.
Hmm.
That is what has actually helped me feel mysteriously loved. Um, so I think that these impulses of distress that
Hmm.
happen for us, whether they're for you, they're physical, or or it's all physical.
Right.
But whatever the impetus is, they're begging us to pay attention to ourselves as though these bodies we're living in really do matter and are worth care and love. And it's in that shift from alarm bells to awareness and attunement that
Mm.
we start to feel this sense of goodness and connection. And so suddenly, this life where I feel pain every single day is also a life where there's love and resilience.
Mm.
So fragility takes us there,
Yeah.
but we have to be willing to attend to it instead
Yeah.
of dismissing it or denying that it's true.
So, what are some, like, when people say attending to something, it tends to get really ethereal for people. It tends to get
Mm-hmm.
really like abstract. Like, I'm attending to this because I'm paying attention to it, or because I'm doing self-care by getting pedicures, or because I mean whatever it is, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not really actual attention to it. How do you, like, in your body, practically, physically attend to these things, whether they be emotional or physical? Because we know the emotional physical divide really doesn't exist.
Right.
It's all your body. But,
Yeah.
like, yeah, how do you attend to these things in an actual, like, tangible way?
Yeah. So always, I'm in a habit of being aware of the shifts in my body and in my nervous system.
Mm.
And so attending to this means when I notice that there's stress rising,
Mhm.
or I notice myself feeling really anxious, um, or afraid, or uh, I'm like berating myself for not doing as well as I wish I could do right now, or expected myself to do. I, instead of trying to just think, you're okay,
Mm.
God is good, He's with you, so everything's fine. I first and foremost breathe.
Mm.
I I've learned over time that all of the pain and stress is an opportunity to soothe my body. And so attending to it really looks like
Mm.
taking a deep breath and, you know, a longer exhale. And it's it's this conscious slowing down to be with myself where I am. And that's a physical thing,
Mm.
to take a breath, to remember my body. And the act of remembering my body and being with myself right there is the thing that makes me more okay, that regulates me.
Mm.
So for me, that's kind of where I start when I say attend to.
Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Sort of slowing yourself down so you're not looking past what you're actually feeling, what's actually happening in your actual body. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, what would attending to like mean to you?
Oh, geez, you're gonna ask me that. Okay. Um, I'm not good at attending to myself. I'm good at grinding through it. I'm good at, well, growing up, I was a really emotional child, and I got made fun of for that in school. My grandpa was not an emotional person, and so my male example was to sort of stuff everything down. And I learned if I did that and was just sort of funny, then people wouldn't make fun of me. So
Mhm.
for me, attending to it is something I'm still learning, because it's so much easier for me to be like, this hurts. I'm going to hide it so that I don't get hurt again.
Mhm.
And I'm going to grind through the pain so nobody knows that I'm hurting.
Yeah.
So it's a very defensive
Yeah.
posture that I take right now. I'm working not to. It's one reason I'm in therapy.
Yeah.
But honestly, that's what I do right now. I don't attend very well.
But I think what you brought up is really important. There's this what we do with our pain. Like, and when I say pain, I mean pain of all kinds, any
Right.
kind of pain. It is often about belonging.
Mm.
Like you learned that you had to shove it down and act funny to belong with the
Mm-hmm.
people around you. And if you didn't, you were treated like you weren't part of the group.
Yeah.
You weren't good enough.
Yeah.
And then but as you're finding now, it's like the ways that we learned how to belong, to earn our place, don't end up serving us forever. And they keep us
Right.
from belonging, like, and then we don't belong with ourselves anymore. And we feel this disconnect. But I think recognizing that there's a threat to belonging happening
Mm-hmm.
with all these feelings of pain is really important.
How so? Like how is, when I feel like I don't belong, which I'm pretty vocal. I live with bipolar 2 as well, so I'm pretty vocal about my emotions on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I just kind of am. um, but when I feel like I don't belong, I'll say stuff on Twitter like, I wish I was one of the cool kids, or I'll be like, the Christians that I hung out with were the ones that went and smoked out behind the gym, and like all of these funny things that are really touching into like what I'm feeling. I guess the question is, how do we attend to belonging when what we learn is to find our place, but what we need is to make our place?
Yeah. And what I'm saying is there is a place within you where you already belong
Mm,
because God has come and drawn near to you. And so there's this belonging that's
yeah.
inside of us that, like today I was doing some yoga, and the teacher, it's a like Christian teacher, and she was talking about how, I forget the reference, but
Mhm.
how in the New Testament they talk about our bodies being the temple of God. And the
Mhm.
word for temple that they use is not just this like generic word temple, but the same word that talks about that the Old Testament talked about, the Holy of Holies. That
Mhm.
like within us, within your body, within my body, is the Holy of Holies. This like we are able there to meet with God, where his glory dwells is within us. And so there's this belonging that's there. But
Mm.
the story of our culture, this and the story that so many Christians too have taken as their own and lived by, is a story where you have to earn your place. You have to make your place. You have to find it. There's only so much space.
Mm.
And God takes that and says, no, like, I've made my place in you. Therefore, you can always belong with me. And it's this, for me, it's this process of coming home again and again to remembering the stuff of my body
Mm.
that I experience this abiding, sure, stable sense that I belong and I
Mm.
am good. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
no, that totally makes sense. The idea that we already belong because we belong to ourselves and to God because He's given Himself, or God's given God's self to us. So let me shift this a little bit.
Yeah.
This sense of belonging to ourselves, what does that do to the idea of accepting others?
Yeah. So much. So much. I mean, if you think about this, even just from like a nervous system standpoint, if I am paying attention to my body and to the shifts happening in my nervous system, and so I'm, instead of like shaming myself for getting stressed, I'm being kind to myself there
Mm.
and offering my body a way to come back to calm. My nervous system is going to be a lot more anchored, and I'm going to be physiologically more capable of being accessing the social engagement system of my brain, which is gonna make me be able to send off signals to other people that they are welcome with me
Mm.
and around me, that I'm a safe place for them, and that they can be who they are here. So, like, as I'm attuned to my body, I'm going
Mhm.
to be able to help others be in my presence and not have to earn their place. If I'm
Mm.
grounded, there's enough space for both of us.
Hmm. I've never thought of it that way before. I mean, I know like
Yeah.
when we're I know when we're calm and our amygdala is not telling us that there's danger, it's easier to access those portions of our brain and think through things and be aware of those around us. But I never thought of the idea of like projecting that this is a safe place and like projecting that belonging of like you belong and I belong and like we
Yeah.
belong
And
to
then it
each other.
starts, yeah. And it starts with, I can only offer that when I'm receiving that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm remaining anchored in this belonging with God, and that's a constant, like, moment by moment, hour by hour practice,
Right.
that's when then I can like offer that to the people that I'm with. But and it's how God made our bodies to be, that like as we are anchored in our nervous system, as we
Mm-hmm.
come back to caring for the physical stuff of who we are, we then can be a safe space, inviting space, expansive, like a spacious place for other
Mm-hmm.
people too. And their nervous system is going to pick up on that. So we all have what Stephen Porges, neuroscientist, coined as neuroception. So like when, without being aware consciously, your nervous system and my nervous system are constantly scanning for safety and for danger, but we have
Mm.
a negativity bias. And so we're a lot more attuned to danger than we are to safety. And
Right.
so you're picking up on like my facial expressions, my body language, and whether I'm saying that I care about who you are and there's room for you to be you. And that's happening all the time underneath the level of conscious awareness. So if I'm anchored grounded in love. I know that I belong with God. I know that God sees me and is glad about who I am and where I am, no matter what, then
Mm,
I am able to be in the state of my nervous system where I can give you the cues that say you're okay. And
mm,
it's a real physical process that's happening all the time. Um, and
no,
it happens the other direction too, that when
yeah.
one person is really feeling insecure, that's contagious as well. But when we personally are present to our own sense of insecurity, we then can be anchored, come back home to
Mm,
that connection to God and self, and change the flow of energy in whatever conversation we're in.
yeah, yeah. So, what about a digital age? I mean, we live our lives online, we have
Yeah.
friends online. I've got a prayer partner online. We've never met face to face, but they feel like a safe place to me.
Mm-hmm.
How does like being grounded in yourself and being how does having this anchored nervous system affect our relationships online? Because the relationships online are real.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna say that they're not,
absolutely.
right? Like I'm
No,
not gonna be
I'm with
like,
you.
but at the same time, they're not that interpersonal one-on-one. I'm picking up your vibes, I'm picking up my nervous system is sensing it's a safe place, you're sensing it's a safe place. It's a different form of friendship, not lesser or greater, just different.
Mm-hmm.
So how does like having an anchored nervous system affect these digital relationships we have?
Yeah, I think it affects it in the same way. I think that there is a challenge to each of us to be even more aware of where we are, because of the way that a screen will kind of take you out of yourself. There is a
Mm-hmm.
disembodied nature to it. I think we
Mm-hmm.
can be a bit disconnected then from a sense of awareness to our nervous system state. And so we might show up in these online spaces less grounded than we could, uh, and less grounded than we need to be, just because we're not in a habit, in a practice of awareness, of checking in. Where am I? How am I? What
Mm-hmm.
brought me here to this place emotionally, physically? And the more that we can cultivate a sense of where we are,
Mm-hmm.
like nervous system wise, I think the more we're going to be able to show up in online spaces, online relationships, grounded, anchored, loving, like looking for connection, but not for filling a void. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really needed. And you can scroll through Twitter and you can tell when there's a bit less than grounded presence.
Yeah.
We can, and I'm not saying that's always bad, but I do think that there's room to show up more grounded and to help ourselves like come to the online space as more of who we are. um
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's a big subject for sure.
Yeah, no, it totally is. Yes, take an entire PhD subject and boil it
Yeah.
down to a few minutes. No, what you said makes a lot of sense. I like that idea of connecting and belonging versus filling a void. That makes a lot of sense to me. I'm wondering though, whether it's an online or in-person relationship, when we are not perfectly doing it because we don't, but when we're in this practice of connecting back to ourselves,
Hmm.
of trying to remember that we belong to ourselves, we belong to God, how can we tangibly, I guess, help other people connect back to themselves? because it's one thing to say I need to remember my own body and I listen to my alarm bells, and it's one thing
Hmm.
to learn your emotions or messages and to learn to listen to those messages. It's another thing to help somebody else see their own alarm bells or see their own
Hmm.
messages, or because we don't even know necessarily what's going on. But how can we
Yeah.
help other
And
people? Yeah.
do you meet in general
Sure, in
or
general,
online?
or I mean, either and or really, because I
Okay.
mean, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So in general, it it's a little bit simpler than you might want to hear. I think the the basic part is that really, like, as I sit here, and if I and I'm feeling, I'm, neuroception, so picking up on where you're at and where I'm
Mhm.
at, uh and I take the attuned route of taking a deep breath, that impacts you.
Mm.
And so as I sit here and I remember to stay present and I remember to stay grounded, I breathe. And if I notice that you're feeling a little overwhelmed, a little off, and I breathe, it's going to help you stay present too. It's going to help you
Mm.
feel like you can be here with me. So there is this wordless kindness and attention that I think we can offer each other, of looking each other in the eye, noticing how the other person is sitting, and picking up on that body language and choosing to remain anchored, to breathe. That's a kindness that actually will affect your body just as much as it affects mine. It's like, what happens for you right now, like as I take a deep breath?
I'm reminded of my own breath,
Mm-hmm.
which in turn reminds me of my body. No, that makes a lot of sense. But what's the difference between being aware of yourself and being absorbed with yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. That is a really great question. So, in my theological orientation, all of this is about communion with God.
Mm-hmm.
So, the end of this awareness is not me. The cultivation of awareness and attunement is always about conversation with and communion with the living God who dwells with me and in our midst. And
Mm.
so it's never going to just end with a focus on myself and an enjoyment in just me. It's always going to be this, just like the Trinity, this kind of dance of connectedness and being and uniqueness and seeing one another at, it's never going to end. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but I think that the telos, the goal of
Mm-hmm.
where we're headed, like who we were made to be, very much shapes the way that we go about where we are now. And so for me, the goal of this whole thing of being alive is to glorify God, enjoy him forever, to be connected, to be in communion with God and others and self and this world. And when we taste that connection to each other and to God and to the world that he made, I think that's when we are being most human. It's never ending just
Mm.
with me.
Yeah. So when we are in tune with ourselves, we can begin to believe that we have a place of belonging. And when I believe that I have a place of belonging, I believe that there's something that I was made for to belong to.
Love
And
seeks an object.
yeah, yeah. And as we move towards that, we also move towards other people because we were made to be in communion.
hmm Yeah, so there's always going to be this circle that
Yeah.
happens that, like, as I attune to where I am, who I am, that is going to strengthen me to come back up and connect.
Mm-hmm.
And to connect with you. And as I feel insecurity rise again, it's
Mm-hmm.
gonna bring me back down to connect here, to be
Yeah.
strengthened, to come back up. It's just this circle, kind of like a dance that
Yeah.
continues.
I like that. I really like that. Because there does seem to be a trend to use the idea of like self compassion as like, I need to be pampered.
Yeah.
And I don't know how healthy that is. I don't know how unhealthy it is either.
Yeah. There's definitely that trend. And I think there's also a trend of self compassion as the end. Like,
Mm.
or perhaps a better way to say it is like self-compassion that is substanceless. Like, what is the point?
Yeah.
Is it just to feel better? Is it what's this headed towards? And I think that we really have to give one another, like, help each other have a vision for, like, a robust, vibrant vision for where are we headed? What is this all about? Who were you made to be?
Mm-hmm.
So within that, self-compassion has a great place.
Yeah.
And it really matters because it's about communion.
Yeah.
But when we detach it from communion, it becomes just a social media slogan that feels good
Mm.
for a moment, but 5 minutes later, after you've scrolled through Twitter for a little bit longer, your pain's still with you, and you don't really know what to do. So,
So what do you do when your pain stays with you? When you attune yourself, but the pain remains?
hmm.
What do you do with that?
Yeah, well, that's my everyday life. Of course, there's seasons for me that are like way more painful physically
Yeah.
with my disease than others. Like, some weeks I'm in so much pain I can't, like, barely sit up in bed. Obviously right now I'm sitting up and I'm mobile. But there's some pain. And so, yeah, like, what do I do with that pain that stays? I think when I've attended to the pain, so when I'm aware of it, I acknowledge that it's there. I'm kind to myself in the fact that I feel dysregulated by it. The
Mm-hmm.
fact that I don't feel strong
Mm-hmm.
when it's there, that attunement of and that acknowledgement of what's going on, it actually strengthens me enough to be able to let pain be a companion in my day, but
Mm-hmm.
not be like driving my car, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's like pain gets to sit at the table uh, and have a voice, and I hear pain, and I respond to pain like I would to a friend sitting at my table, but only Jesus sits at the head of my table,
Mm-hmm.
and only Jesus says who can belong. So pain can't say that also the therapist self in me and the writer self in me don't belong. And pain, there'll be times that pain shouts that.
Mm-hmm.
um, but there's this, I think there's more space at that table for all the parts of me when I tell pain, hey, I see you, I hear you, I know you're here.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you need? What can I give you to help you? When I tell that pain, then there's more room at the table for the rest of me to keep showing up in my life.
Wow. I've never thought about I've thought about the idea of giving pain a voice, but never like inviting pain to sit with me because it's part of me. That's it's challenging. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think it's a little difficult, even, existentially, theologically,
Yeah,
because there is real evil
yeah,
there, and there is real darkness. And so there's a mystery to this relationship that we have with our own pain. It's like, I'm not saying that I am my pain,
right.
but I am saying that this pain is part of my life. And I can choose, I can cultivate a different kind of relationship with that pain. I don't have to only this for me, because pain is every single day, and which I guess really is being human. Sometimes I'm just a little more aware of it because it yells at me in my
Right.
spine or whatever. But um, I can be, I can treat pain like an enemy, or I can treat it like a friend, because my friend Jesus is here with me too, and so I'm safe no matter what.
Mm,
And so we can welcome pain here, and we can extend the kindness of Jesus to it and hear what it has to say, hear what it needs. Oh, it changes. That cultivating compassion toward even this pain and what the pain does in me and to me, and how I show up, far less than
yeah.
my most ideal version of myself, to get back to that idealism.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. This is my favorite question to ask people.
Okay, cool.
In light of everything that we have talked about, in light of anchoring ourselves, in light of attuning, in light of other people, 1 second. My dog really wanted to join the conversation.
Mm.
So, in light of everything that we've been talking about,
Mm-hmm.
what does this do to your articulation of the gospel, of the good news?
Yeah, it changes everything. Yeah. So I used to live like I had to earn God's love, even though we all know that that's not the gospel. Like,
Right.
grace is a free gift. Functionally, I lived like I had to earn God's attention,
Mm,
just like I had to earn my parents' attention.
mm,
And pain has invited me to see that even when I cannot earn God's attention, there there's nothing left in me to do anything that's amazing, or even sit up in my bed.
mm,
That God is already there, smiling at me or weeping with me. He's present to me and with me, no matter how weak I am.
mm,
The good news is that I'm already accepted, I'm already loved, and that because God took on human flesh, my body really is the dwelling place of God
mm,
now.
mm,
So the good news then isn't just this abstract truth that my mind knows but my life struggles to absorb. The
mm,
good news becomes this reality that I get to inhabit and um, see and realize and participate in and extend to other
mm,
people in my physical body. As I come back home to this belonging and this place of worship that's within me in my physicality, moment by moment and day by day. So this has made the good news of the gospel alive for me.
Mm. That's beautiful. It really is.
Mm.
Yeah. Wow. I've just, you've just blown me away with this idea of like coming back to yourself, to your whole self, and to your experience, and letting it all sit at your table, and that actually bringing you into the good news. That's a little paradigm shifting in a good way, in a really good way.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah, maybe a little different. But I really do, what I've experienced is that my own brokenness, my own pain, and the way that it keeps coming back up.
Mm-hmm.
And like somehow my story has been that I can't overcome it. And
Yeah.
I know that you have that in your story too. These reminders of my brokenness, they're like invitations for my whole self, for like every single part of me to belong. Like God's saying, all of you is welcome at my table. I don't leave any part behind. I don't say that part of you can only sit at the kids' table. The rest of you is welcome here. Like
Right.
Jesus welcomes all of us, but it's listening to these rising feelings of inadequacy or anger or shame, fear.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we have that physical invitation to come back home.
Yeah.
It's a very physical coming back home of taking a breath. Sometimes it takes more than that, but taking a breath, that's what brings us back to the table. So these parts of ourselves that we hate then actually become the parts of ourselves that bring us to fellowship with Jesus, our friend.
Yeah. Helps us love ourselves because we see that they are doing something good in us in some way, not just not just being something to butt heads with or to try and overcome, or some
Get rid
Goliath
of.
for us to slay, or whatever you want to say. Wow.
Yeah, they're just reminders to come home.
That's beautiful. God, that really is. Well, thank you so much. You have been an absolute delight to talk to.
Thank you. Likewise.
If people want to find you, where can they find you?
Yeah, kjramsey.com is my website, and you can get links to my book, which I have next to me. This Too Shall Last. There, and then on social media, I'm at KJ Ramsey Writes, and I'm on Twitter and Instagram. Technically Facebook, although I don't really do much there, but Instagram's my favorite, and then I kind of show up a little bit on Twitter too. But yeah,
that's beautiful. Thank you so much. Well, you have a great rest of your day.
You too.
I hope you practice belonging today.
Yes.
I know
I need
will.
to.
I know I will. So thank
Good.
you so much.
Thank you.